10 when Queen Elizabeth visited the United States. And when she showed up, it's interesting that the Time magazine did an article on it. It just kind of showed all the requirements for her visit, all the requirements for her showing up. It said that, in the article, it said that she carried 4,000 pounds of luggage with her. The Queen Mother, it says in the article, in the same article, it says that she carried at least 2 outfits for every occasion, just in case one of her dresses or outfits got stained. She had 40 pounds of plasma in case there was an emergency. But this was my favorite. There was a guy she brought along whose sole job was to take care of the bathrooms before she went into it. And one of the things he had to do was he would carry around this collection, this set of calfskin toilet seat covers that he would have to go in and place on every toilet before the Queen ever made her entrance into the bathroom. And just the cost and the expense of the extravagance of this entrance, they said that it cost them $20 million just to have the Queen show up in the United States. And you think about it, that's how we expect royalty to show up, though, isn't it? I mean, you expect a little bit of fanfare, you expect a little bit of noise, you expect a little bit of luxury and extravagance, and yet when the King of Kings shows up, he chooses a very different way. He chooses a radically different arrival to announce a radically different kind of king. And in fact, I love how John kind of speaks and describes this coming king and how and why he chose to come the way he did. He puts it this way. He says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made." This is referring to Jesus here. It said, "Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light for all mankind." See, on that Christmas morning was born a king who came not to impose his will, but to reveal it. A king who came not to impose his will, but reveal it. There was a Danish philosopher / theologian in the 1800s, and he tells this really cool story of this king who one day as he was looking out at his castle, he spotted this peasant girl out the window. And as he saw her, like immediately, it was love at first sight. He saw her and he goes back to his advisors and he's like, "Man, what do I got to do to meet this girl? I've met the love of my life. What can you guys do? What do we got to get done to make this a rendezvous happen so I can sit down and talk with her and get to know her?" And the advisors look to the king and they're like, I don't know what to tell you. She's a peasant girl. You're a king. You're royalty. I don't think this is not how it's supposed to work. I don't think we can make this happen. And yet the king's looking at this girl, and he just can't get her out of his mind. He's like, "Man, I've got to meet this girl. In fact, not only am I just in love with this girl, I think at first sight, I can see my future wife in this girl." And he's like, "You got to make this happen." So the advisors go, well, why don't you just order it? Well, why don't you just, command her to meet with you and ultimately marry you? I mean, you can do that. You're the king, right? And this king in the story, he goes, "Well, yeah." He goes, "I could totally do that. I've got the wealth. I got the power. I've got the ability. But how would I actually know if she actually loved me back?" So the advisors are like, "Well, okay. Well, why don't you just lavish her with a bunch of gifts, a bunch of treasures? Take her for one amazing night around the town, on your beautiful white horse and all that. I mean, you could do all that stuff." And again, the king's like, "Well, same deal. If I just give her a bunch of stuff, how do I know she doesn't just love me just for my stuff and my wealth and not me?" And so the advisors are like, "Well, I don't know what to tell you, king, but you're just going to have to find another woman, I think. Find another girl who's more of royal pedigree than this peasant girl." And so the king, he thinks about this, and he's heartbroken. He's frustrated because he can't get this girl out of his mind. So a couple days pass, and again, he's thinking about the love of his life, and he comes to a decision where in Kierkegaard's story, it says the king, one day he decided that the only way to reach her, the only way to engage with her was to lay aside his royal robes, to step down outside of his palace, to quit giving orders, but to start receiving them, even to the point of begging for food in the slum just so he could connect and relate to this peasant. And look, I love that story because When you think about it, that story is more than a fable. It's more than a myth. It's more than just a cute little, kids book story. That's the story of Christmas, is it not? The story of our God who would choose to put skin on it and come down and to be born in that manger. Not to impose his will, but to reveal his will. To reveal his heart and to reveal his love and to reveal his pursuit for you and for me. That's the king that we celebrate. That's the king that we worship, that showed up in that manger 2,000 years ago. And I like how John 1 kind of illustrates and really explains the story. And again, it gives us light into it. In verses 9 through 12, it says, the one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him, all who accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. Again, this is a king who didn't come to impose his will, but he came, got down on our level to reveal his heart, to shine a light on his love and his pursuit for you and for I, revealing the very extent of his love for us. In fact, I love what John says in verse 9, where it says he's a light for everyone. Everyone. Last I checked in the Greek, everyone is everyone. All of us. Which leads to the second thing here. It says, on that Christmas morning 2,000 years ago, we see that born is the king who established his rule with those who others ruled out. Born is the king who established his rule with those who others have ruled out. On that Christmas morning, there was a lot of pronouncements made about this king who was being born. A savior, a messiah. But one of the most prevalent ones in the gospel accounts is this term Emmanuel, God with us. And I love that statement, God with us, because something you got to understand about the biblical characters of that day is that this news, God with us, wouldn't have been new to them. This wasn't like a foreign concept to them. I mean, this wasn't like, oh, wow, we never, God with us. Wow, this is a brand new thing. I mean, they understood that God was with us. They believed that God was with us in that moment. But here's the thing. They believed in this reality that God is with us with an asterisk mark. See, because back in that day, they had what was known as like the Jewish temple. And the Jewish temple could actually be broken down into three parts. You had your outer courts, you had your inner courts, and you had your Holy of Holies. And the outer courts, most of the people of God, the Jewish nation, they could go, they could be there. But then you had the inner courts for the more religious, for the more special, for the more put together. But then you had what was known as the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was there, where it was believed the very presence of God was. And only the most special, only the most put together priest could actually enter into that place. See, they believed in the message, God is with us, Emmanuel, but it was God is with us was an asterisk mark. And yet the story of Christmas is that God comes down. That God was born in the way he was born to remind us it's no longer God is with us, asterisk mark. It's just God is with us, period. That he's with us in all of our mess, in all of our stuff, in all of our issues, in all of our junk. That his heart isn't reserved just for the special, for the really ultra-religious, for those who've got it put together. His heart is for each and every one of us. In all of our mess, for the good, the bad, the ugly of us. It's why he chose to come the way he came. It's why he chose to show up to guys like the wise men. The wise men, think about it. These were not Jewish people. They were not the people of God. I mean, here's the king of the Jews coming into the world. And one of the first people he announced himself to are wise men. These were like magicians. So imagine like your nativity set. You got Gandalf standing right in the middle, right? I mean, that's who these guys were. They were spiritual, but they were not religious. They knew there was more to their life than they were living. But he shows up to the wise men or the shepherds. We talked about this last week. The shepherds, these guys, no kid in class. We like to think of the shepherds like Sound of Music, just frolicking through the fields and are happy-go-lucky people. But the shepherds in that day, when kids were growing up and it came career day, no kid was raising their hand saying, I want to be a shepherd. Because that was like the equivalent of saying, I want to be a convict or a drug dealer. That's how they viewed shepherds in that day. And yet here, Jesus, the angels, they announced the coming of this Messiah. They announced the arrival of this king to shepherds and wise men, the most overlooked, the most forgotten, the most rejected, the most ruled out of society, to remind us of the depths of his heart and the depths of his love and the depths of his pursuit for you and for me. Which leads to the last thing of this king, is that born is a king who broke all the rules for you and for me. Born is a king who broke all the rules for you and for me. Out of curiosity, does anyone got like Christmas rules? You got like Christmas rules when it comes to your Christmas? Like me growing up, we had basically one rule when it came to opening up gifts, and that was that there were no rules at all. It was like, the moment it was time to open up gifts, like it was just free for all between my brother and I. We also had another rule, which was that we couldn't wake my parents up before like 5 a.m., which was a problem because my brother and I, on Christmas night, we couldn't sleep past 2 in the morning. So it left this awkward window of like time, like what are we going to do for these next several hours, waiting for the clock to hit 5 a.m. And so it was actually one time a year that my brother had this incredible Christmas generosity, and he would actually open up the door of his room to let me in to watch TV. The only time all year, and he would let me in. I say let me in, but it was more like, it was definitely with an asterisk mark, because I was only allowed to sit like right in the doorway, and I kind of watched from the side, and he had this little tiny like black and white TV. And, but this was back before, you have like a gazillion channels like we got now. Like there were like 3 channels on this TV. And for some odd reason, like every Christmas, for some reason they love to show these black and white movies of Elvis. Like Elvis, the king of rock and roll. I don't know why, and it was always like, Elvis in Hawaii. I guess like nothing speaks Christmas more than like Elvis and tiki torches. I don't know, but that's what I do. I'd sit there, and from a distance, I just, I'd watch this. And look, I share that because I kind of wonder if there's not some of us in here tonight, and you come in here, and maybe that distance when it comes to your relationship with the King of Kings, your relationship with Jesus, isn't because you feel like you're too bad for God to love you, too bad for God to want a relationship with you, but it's that you think, well, I'm really not that bad. I'm really not that bad. Like we have this tendency to kind of think of Jesus, think of God as kind of like Santa Claus God. Like he's got this naughty and nice list, right? And depending on how we connect or how we do in relation to this list, aka his law, his 10 commandments, depending on if we do a little more nice things or good things than bad things, then we're all good. We're all good in the eyes of God. We're all good in our relationship with him. But here's the problem, is that when the Bible speaks of you and I, it doesn't speak of us in relation to good people and bad people. It's not like when he established the laws. It's not like he did it so that way all of a sudden we be able to understand that bad people, if we're bad people, we just need to get a little better, or if we're good people, we just made a few mistakes. In fact, interesting enough, the law was actually never meant to actually draw us closer to God, but it was actually to remind us how far apart we are from him. In fact, Romans 3:20 puts it this way: for no one can ever be made right with God by doing what the law commands. The law simply shows us how sinful we are. See, what you got to get is that you and I, we're not bad people who just need to do a little bit better. Or good people who just made a few mistakes here and there. No, you and I, we're sinners in need of a Savior. And look, I get the pushback from some of you. Like, how dare you? The one time a year I come to church and you're going to call me a sinner. And listen, I'm going to tell you, it's actually even worse than that. You and I, we're wretched, black-hearted sinners. It's awful. And listen, every single one of us, and then the reason I share that is because look, again, it's not about good or bad. It's understanding that you and I were born with this sinful tendency. We're born with this sinful nature. And listen, if you're like, well, I don't really believe in that, that just, what that tells me, it just means that you're not a parent. You're not a parent of toddlers, because if any parent of a 4-year-old who ever tries to tell a 4-year-old no, or wakes up on Christmas morning and gives them a gift of a bunch of clothes instead of toys, you know that we're born with a sinful nature. We're born with this tendency in all of us, with this sin condition, this sin issue, which is what brings us all the way back around of why a king? Why a king? Why was a king born? Listen, the reason that a king was born 2,000 years ago was because it took a king to do what only a king could do. And that's pay a king's ransom for your sin and for my sin. To break down the walls of the separation and the distance that our sin created in our relationship with God. He came to pay a price for you and for me, so that way we could truly experience the peace and the joy that's proclaimed on that Christmas morning 2,000 years ago. And listen, it's so important that you get this, because you'll never understand fully the purpose of the cradle without understanding the cross and the price he paid on the cross for you and for me. You'll never really understand why he was born if you don't understand why he died. See, so often we love to, around this time of year say, hey, the reason for the season is Jesus. And while that's kind of true, it kind of also misses the mark. Because the true reason for Christmas is you. You're why he came. You're why he was born. You're why he went to that cross and paid a price you and I could never pay. To announce to you, I love you. I got a plan for you. I've been pursuing you from the creation of the world, from the foundations of it all, from before the day you were even born. I was already on a pursuit after you. And listen, I don't think that just like it wasn't by accident, Jesus chose to announce his arrival that morning to shepherds and wise men and to a couple of teenagers in the middle of nowhere, in a town in the middle of the sticks. It's not by accident you're here tonight. Because for some of you, God wants to give you the greatest gift you could possibly ever receive and open up this year. That's the gift of Jesus. That's the gift of not some distant, religious, worship of a distant God, but actually a relationship with the King of Kings. He loves you so much. They sit there and say, well, that's great and all, but how do I even do that? How do I even step in? How do I open up that kind of gift? You know how you open up that gift? How you receive the King of Kings in your heart? It starts with just an act of surrender. Just simply saying yes to God. You think about it, the most important decisions in our life, they require a yes oftentimes, don't they? But like have you ever been on an airplane and they sit you in the exit aisle, the exit row, like they expect you to give a yes, I can open up that door if the plane goes down, right? Like a head nod doesn't do it. Like you've actually got to say yes. Or the groom that proposes to the woman of his dreams gets down on his knee and he's like, will you marry me? And she's like, oh, yeah, yes, yeah, I've got the colors I got the colors picked. And he's, in the craziness of it all, it's like, what did you just say? Did you say yes? I need a yes, I need a real yes. And then she's all crying and I'm going to call this person and this person. It's like, no, a yes, I need a yes. That's what God is calling out to you tonight. You want to open up the greatest gift. You want to truly experience the peace and the joy that was announced on that Christmas morning 2,000 years ago. It starts and happens with a simple yes. Jesus, I surrender my life to you tonight. So with every head bowed, every eye closed, that's the gift and the opportunity I offer you tonight. Don't let this time pass by. The reality is that a couple of days, Christmas will be here and gone. The thrill of those gifts you open up Christmas morning, it'll be past. But you can open up a gift tonight and experience something. Experience a change in your heart and your life that will last forever. A joy and a peace that passes understanding. So if that's you, if maybe you've never asked the King of Kings to come into your life, maybe you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, or it's been a really long time since you have. Every head bowed, every eye closed. I want to ask if you have the courage to simply raise your hand. So I want to pray with you. Father, I recognize that at the end of the day, I'm a lot like those shepherds. I'm a lot like the wise men. I'm a mess. I'm a mess of sin and shame, and I've missed the mark more times than I can even remember or count. And yet, I believe you love me enough to come to be born on that day, and ultimately go to a cross and pay a price that I'll never pay. So, Father, I ask you to come into my life. Be Lord, be Savior, be King. In Jesus' name. If you pray that prayer, man, I just want to celebrate with you. And also encourage you, we love to be able to stand with you, love to be able to get you a few more resources. And so if that's you, encourage you to fill out a connection card, drop it in that offering box. We'd love to, again, send you some resources that you just take next steps in our relationship with Jesus. But again, it comes down to, I can't think of a greater gift, right? King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and not just this distant religious worship